He wouldn't let anyone treat him. Not the doctor, not security, not even when his blood was turning poisonous and his heart was sprinting toward a flat line. So here's the question that hurts. What kind of pain makes a man choose death over help and call it duty? It was 2:11 a.m. in Charleston, South Carolina. Rain hammered the ICU windows like gunfire. The hallway smelled of disinfectant and wet rubber. Inside room 7B, a dying man backed into the headboard, gripping a plastic pitcher like a grenade eyes scanning corners that weren't there. A young physician raised a syringe. A veteran nurse stepped between steel and skin and whispered a phrase no hospital should ever know. Stay with me. By the end, you'll understand why trust can be stronger than medicine. If you're watching Hit, drop a comment with your city and don't blink. Don't blink, I said. The ICU never did. It just kept breathing through fluorescent light and disinfectant, through the steady bite of alarms and the wet percussion of rain on glass. In Charleston, storms did not simply arrive. They laid a hand on the city's throat and squeezed until everything moved slower, heavier, more careful. At St. Bridget's Medical Center, the night shift carried that pressure in their shoulders. The floor wax shone like calm water. Shoes squeaked in tired loops between supply closets and patient rooms. A housekeeping cart sat abandoned near the nurses' station because someone had called for extra linens and nobody had time to explain why. The smell of chlorhexidine clung to the air, sharp and clean, the kind of clean that never quite erased fear. Claire Maddox stood behind the ICU desk with her hair pinned tight and her badge turned outward like a promise. Charge nurse. 2 decades of trauma work stamped into the way she looked at a room. She did not scan faces first. She scanned hands. She watched what people held, what they reached for, what they hid. A respiratory therapist walked past with a vent circuit hugged to his chest, eyes fixed forward like he could outrun the night. A new grad nurse hovered at the med room door, staring at the Pyxis screen as if the numbers might rearrange themselves into mercy. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor chirped and chirped again, the sound climbing the spine like a cold finger. Claire, someone called. She turned. Dr. Nolan Pierce stood at the edge of the station chart in hand, shoulders squared under a white coat that still looked too crisp for a night like this. He was young enough to have a restless shine behind his eyes, the kind that came from believing the right answer always existed if you moved fast enough. He did not greet her. He did not ask how the unit was holding. He pointed at the board where beds were marked with dry erase rectangles. 7B, he said. New admit. 2 minutes ago, Claire replied. EMS is finishing transfer. Unknown male. Found down near the port. Pierce's pen tapped his clipboard, quick and impatient. Vitals. Fever. Tachycardic. Confused. Claire watched his pen pause on the word confused. Wound on the lower leg. Looks infected. Pierce inhaled through his nose. So sepsis. We need access. We need to keep him alive long enough to get it, Claire said. Pierce's eyes flicked up, irritated. That is what access is for. He pivoted toward the hallway, already moving, already writing. Claire followed at a steadier pace. She had learned not to burn her energy on the first lap of the race. The elevator doors opened and 2 paramedics rolled a stretcher into the ICU. Water dripped off their jackets. The older medic had rain in his hair and a jaw clenched around exhaustion. The younger one kept glancing back over his shoulder, like something might be following them out of the storm. On the stretcher lay a man wrapped in a thin blanket that did nothing to hide how little body was left. He was tall, but hollowed-out skin, drawn tight over bones. His face was cut with old scars and new sweat. A gray stubble covered his cheeks. One eye was milky and unfocused, the other sharp as a blade, tracking movement in short, precise bursts. The older medic spoke first. Found him in an alley off East Bay, near the container yards. Bystander said he came out of the rain and dropped, no ID. Smells like diesel and old smoke. We thought hypothermia, but he was burning up. Pierce stepped in, already checking the monitor leads, already calling out orders. Temperature, 103.4 in the rig. the younger medic said. Heart rate in the 150s. Pressure bouncing. He's been fighting us. As if to prove it, the man's head lifted. His gaze locked on the IV catheter taped to the older medic's hand. Do not, the man rasped. The voice was shredded gravel dragged over glass. Touch me. Pierce leaned closer, professional smile that never reached his eyes. Sir, you're at a hospital. We are helping you. The man's fingers flexed under the blanket, searching for leverage, searching for a weapon. That is what you say, he whispered. Then you put me under. Claire watched his breathing. Not shallow, not frantic, measured. 4 counts in hold, controlled release. Tactical, the kind of breathing you learned when panic would get you killed. Pierce reached for the blanket to expose an arm. The man exploded upward with a feral strength that did not match his wasted body. His forearm whipped out and struck Pierce's wrist with a snapping motion. Pierce's pen flew clattering to the floor. The IV catheter skittered across the waxed tiles. Back, the man snarled. Back off the line! The younger medic grabbed the stretcher rail. Easy, sir. We just need to get you stabilized. The man's head turned sharply toward the sound of the medic's voice. For a moment, looked through the kid past him like he was seeing something older than the ICU. Broken arrow, he breathed. The words came out like a reflex. Broken arrow. Claire felt the hair at the back of her neck lift. She had heard that phrase once, long ago, not in a hospital, but in her childhood kitchen from her father, half asleep and shaking when he thought nobody could hear him. Pierce regained his grip and his temper with it. Security, he called over his shoulder. Now! The older medic tried again, softer. Sir, you've got an infection. Your heart is racing. We need fluids and antibiotics. No needles, the man hissed, no sleep. He swung his legs, trying to roll off the stretcher. His bare heel clipped a supply cart. Metal rattled. A box of gloves toppled and burst blue nitrile, spilling onto the floor like confetti at a funeral. Hold him, Pierce snapped. Hands reached. The man's right palm drove forward in a short strike that hit the older medic square in the nose. There was a wet crack. The medic grunted and reeled back, blood spilling down his lip. Jesus, the younger medic gasped. The man's one good eye stayed cold. Not rage, calculation. Claire saw it with a clarity that made her stomach sink. He was not lashing out blindly. He was clearing a perimeter. Security arrived in a rush of heavy footsteps. 2 guards, broad-shouldered radios clipped at their collars, eyes wide with the look of men who usually dealt with drunk visitors, not someone who moved like a trained weapon. Restraints, Pierce said. 4 point. Now. Doc 1 guard began glancing at the man's thin frame. He's old. The man turned his head toward the guard. His voice dropped low, intimate, lethal. Step inside 3 feet and you lose it. The guard stopped without realizing he had stopped. Claire stepped forward. Let me try. Pierce's head snapped toward her. No. 2 sentences, Claire said, calm as a hand on a pulse. Then you do what you want. Pierce stared at her, jaw flexing. He hated time wasted. It showed in the way his fingers squeezed his clipboard. But the monitor alarmed again, faster, higher, and he did what doctors did when a machine demanded attention. 2, he said. That's all you get. Claire moved closer, slowly, hands open at her sides. No sudden gestures, no grabbing, no crowding. She kept her body angled, not square, letting him see her palms. Sir, she said, my name is Claire. I'm not here to put you to sleep. I'm here to keep you breathing. The man's gaze locked on her badge. Read it. Stored it. Your charge, he murmured. Yes, Claire said. And I need to look at your leg. His lips peeled back over stained teeth. That's how you start. That's how infections work, Claire replied. They don't care what you're afraid of. Something flickered behind his good eye. Pain, maybe. Or memory. Then he spat words like a warning. First the sedative, then the extraction. Pierce stepped forward, patience gone. Enough. We are done with this. The guards moved in again. The man kicked, catching one in the thigh with a sharp heel. The guard grunted and grabbed the stretcher rail. Another guard lunged toward the man's shoulders. The man thrashed, and the heart rate monitor screamed, climbing into the 160s. Claire saw the rhythm on the display, jagged, chaotic. Atrial fibrillation, fast and ugly, the heart trying to run away from itself. His skin was slick with sweat. His lips were dry and cracked. The smell that rose off him was sour and metallic. Pierce drew up medication with quick practiced hands. Lorazepam, he said, like the word itself, was a solution. Claire stepped into the space between the syringe and the man's arm. Pierce froze, his voice sharpened. Buzz. Claire pointed at the monitor. His rhythm is unstable. His adrenaline is pegged. You push that now and you risk dropping his pressure through the floor. You risk stopping his heart. Pierce's eyes flicked to the screen. For a moment, the anger in him hesitated, forced to contend with physiology. The man on the stretcher wheezed, tears leaking from the corner of his good eye. He was not crying in the way frightened patients cried. His face stayed hard. His jaw stayed set. The tears were something else, a body reaction like sweat, like blood. He whispered into the air, repeating the same phrase as if trying to reach someone only he could hear. Unit 9. Heavy static. Confirm. Unit 9. Claire held his gaze. Sir, she said softly. No one is attacking you. He laughed, raw and humorless. That is what they always say. Pierce exhaled like a man trying not to break something. We do not have time for this. He is septic. He needs fluids. He needs antibiotics. He needs access. He needs calm, Claire said, or your access kills him. Pierce looked at the guards, then back at the monitor, then at Claire. His pride and his training wrestled in his face. 5 minutes, Pierce said finally, the words tasting like defeat. 5 minutes alone. If he is not hooked up to an IV after that, I am calling police transport, and we do it the hard way. Claire nodded once. Clear the room. One of the guards hesitated. You want us to leave you with him? Claire did not look away from the man on the stretcher. Yes. The guards backed out slow. The medics withdrew. Pierce lingered at the doorway, eyes narrowed, the kind of look that promised he would remember this later. 5, he repeated. The door shut. The sound clicked into place like a lock on a cell. Inside the room, the storm noise faded to a low roar behind the blinds. The lights hummed overhead. The air smelled of antiseptic and sweat and something older like smoke trapped in cloth. Claire did not move closer. She pulled a chair from the corner and set it down at the foot of the bed, far enough away to be safe, close enough to be heard. She sat. She let her hands rest on her knees. She did not speak. She waited. The man stayed braced against the headboard, shoulders, hunched blanket slipping from his chest. His ribs stood out. His hands shook, but his eyes never stopped scanning. Door. Ceiling tiles. The corner near the oxygen port. The floor near the bed where a cord could trip someone. He tracked the room like a map. Claire watched him watch. His right index finger tapped his thigh in a pattern. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap. Tap, tap. The rhythm had discipline, the kind of habit you did not develop in a safe life. Your leg, Claire said quietly after a long moment. The man's gaze snapped to her. No. You're bleeding through the dressing, she replied. I can smell it. He tightened his grip on the blanket like it was cover. You touch, and you mark me. Claire swallowed down a surge of anger that did not belong in this room. It belonged to every preventable death she had watched happen, because fear won. She kept her voice flat, controlled. Tell me your name. The man's jaw worked. I don't have one. You have one, Claire said. Even if you don't want to use it. His eyes narrowed, the good one sharp enough to cut. Why do you care? Claire held his stare. Because your chart says unknown. Unknown people die quicker in hospitals. They get handled. They get moved. They get forgotten. He made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had not been so bitter. Forgotten is safer. Claire leaned back slightly, giving him space. You're not acting like someone who wants to be safe. You're acting like someone who thinks he has a job to do. His tapping stopped. Silence filled the gap between them. In that silence, Claire noticed details that did not belong to a simple alley collapse. His hands were scarred in tight lines across the knuckles, not from construction work, but from impacts and friction and time spent gripping something hard. There were burn marks on his forearms that looked like old chemical burns, irregular and deep. Near his left wrist, a faded tattoo peeked out from beneath a jagged burn scar. The ink was blurred by age, but the shape suggested a medieval figure, a knight or something like it, and a small bolt of lightning. Claire's breath caught. Not because the tattoo itself meant anything to modern medicine, because it meant something to her. Her father had a tattoo on his upper arm. He never let anyone see it in daylight. When she was a kid, she had walked in on him changing his shirt and seen the ink for half a second before he covered it and turned his back like she had witnessed a crime. A night. A lightning bolt. She did not say it. She did not let her face change. She stayed still. The man's gaze darted to the corner of her scrub top where her badge clip sat. "You got a family nurse?" Claire nodded. "Had. My father's gone." The man's eyes softened for a fraction of a second, then hardened again. "Then you don't understand." Claire felt something stir in her chest. A memory of her father, sitting in the basement on holidays, lights off, breathing like he was trying to make himself smaller. The way he flinched at fireworks. The way he woke up drenched in sweat, whispering into the dark voice, tight with panic and command. She chose her words carefully. "I understand more than you think." He watched her distrust etched into every line of his face. "What did he tell you?" "Nothing," Claire said. That was the point. A flicker of something crossed his expression. Approval, maybe. Or relief. The kind you felt when someone proved they knew the rules. He shifted slightly, wincing as his lower body moved. Claire saw his hand drift to his shin fingers, pressing against a dressing that had darkened at the edges. Infection. Swelling. The smell of pus was faint, but present. This was not a wound from that night. It had been brewing. "I can clean it," Claire said. "No sedative, no needle, just cleaning." He shook his head slowly. "You clean and you see." "I see already," Claire replied. "You're burning up. You're shaking. Your heart is trying to outrun your body. If you don't let me treat you, you die." His stare stayed flat. "Dying is easy." Claire felt her throat tighten. "Then why are you fighting?" His mouth trembled. "Not weakness. Containment. Because I can't sleep." The words landed heavy, unexpected. Claire kept her voice gentle. "Why?" He glanced at the ceiling tiles, eyes unfocused for the first time. "If I sleep, I talk. If I talk, they find it." "Find what?" Claire asked. His finger tapped his temple once hard. "The ledger." Claire did not react. The word sounded like nonsense in a hospital room, but the way he said it was not nonsense. It was inventory. It was proof. It was burden. He looked at her with sudden raw fear, the kind you could not fake. "That doctor, the one with the clipboard. He has handler eyes." Claire thought of Pierce, his rigid posture, his clipped commands. She imagined how he looked through the eyes of a hunted man. A stranger in a white coat. Authority. A syringe. "He's a doctor," Claire said. "He's not your handler." The man's lips curled. "They always wear clean clothes when they come for you." Claire's mind ran through possibilities. Delirium. PTSD. Fever psychosis. Heavy metals. She had seen all of it, but there was a difference between a mind that broke and a mind that remembered. Claire leaned forward, just slightly careful not to invade his space. "You used a phrase earlier." He blinked once. "What phrase?" "Broken arrow," Claire said. His throat worked. "Don't say it." "Why?" Claire asked, still soft. He swallowed. "Because it calls the wrong kind of attention." Claire felt her pulse in her ears. Her father had never explained the phrase. He had never explained the night terrors. He had never explained the tattoo. But he had once grabbed her wrist when she was 13, when she had asked him why he flinched at fireworks, and he had said, voice shaking with a force that scared her more than anger. "Some things are kept quiet, because saying them is how you die." Claire looked at the man on the bed and felt that old warning rise from the past like cold water. She kept her face neutral. "What unit?" The man's eyes sharpened again. "There is no unit." Claire nodded slowly. "You keep saying Unit 9. His jaw clenched. The tapping started again faster. Tap, tap, tap. "That's not a unit." That's a channel. Claire let a long breath out through her nose. Who taught you? He stared at her, measuring. You ask too many questions. And you're refusing care, Claire replied. We're even. The room's monitor beeped irregular. His heart was still fast, still chaotic. Fever lit his skin. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The tremor in his hands grew more noticeable. Infection and fear feeding each other. Claire reached for a clean washcloth from the bedside cart, moving slowly enough he could track her. She held it up like a peace offering. I'm going to wet this, she said. I'm going to wipe your face. That's it. The man's gaze flicked to the sink. Back to her hands. Back to the door. Claire stood, moved to the sink, ran water, and wrung the cloth until it was damp. She did not turn her back for long. She knew better. When she approached, she stopped just outside arm's reach. She extended the cloth and waited. His eyes narrowed. You want me to do it? Yes, Claire said. You stay in control. For a long moment, he did not move. Then slowly he reached out, took the cloth, and wiped his own face with trembling hands. The action looked small, but it was a crack in the wall. Claire sat back down. You're not trying to hurt me, he said, voice barely audible, like the admission itself cost him pain. No, Claire replied. I'm trying to keep you alive. He stared at the cloth in his hands. Alive is complicated. Claire felt the weight of those words. She kept her tone steady. Tell me something simple. How long has your leg been infected? He hesitated. Weeks. Why didn't you come in? Claire asked. His lips pressed together. Hospitals have records. Claire nodded once. They do. He looked up suddenly. And microphones. Claire did not roll her eyes. She did not laugh. She glanced at the ceiling and then back to him. In here, we have call lights and monitors. That's it. His gaze stayed suspicious. You sure? Claire's mind flashed to the hospital's cameras in hallways, the security desk, the way data moved through systems whether people wanted it to or not. She chose honesty without feeding the paranoia. There are cameras in the hall, she said. Not in patient rooms. Not unless law enforcement requests it. That takes paperwork. The man's face tightened at the word law enforcement. His hand clenched the cloth. Claire softened her voice. No one is requesting anything. Right now, you're just a man with a fever. His good eye studied her, searching for a lie. Then he muttered, Fever makes you talk. Claire nodded. It can. He looked away, jaw rigid. That's how they get you. Claire felt anger flash hot and fast. Not at him. At whoever had taught him to fear sleep like an interrogation chair. She kept her tone calm. Who is they? The man's lips parted, then closed. He shook his head. If I say it, it becomes real. It's real already, Claire said quietly. You're shaking. He swallowed hard. Because I remember. Claire's gaze drifted back to the tattoo on his forearm. The ink was faded, but the outline was unmistakable. Her father's mark mirrored on a stranger's skin. She heard a sound through the wall. Voices in the hallway. The squeak of Pierce's shoes. The click of a pen. Time. Claire stood, walked to the bedside cart, and pulled out a blood pressure cuff. She held it up, not moving closer. Let me check your pressure, she said. No needle. He stared at the cuff like it might bite. Then he extended his arm halfway, as if doing it fully would be a surrender. Claire slipped the cuff on without brushing his skin more than necessary. His forearm was thin skin, warm and damp. She felt the tremor in his muscles like an engine misfiring. The cuff inflated, squeezed, released. Claire read the number and felt her stomach tighten. Low. Borderline. Sepsis tugging at the edges of his circulation. You need fluids, she said. He pulled his arm back. No IV. Claire did not argue yet. She reached for the pulse oximeter instead, clipping it to his finger. His hand jerked at the touch, then steadied. She watched the oxygen number settle. Not terrible. Not good. Everything about him was a knife edge. The door handle rattled. Claire turned her head slightly, listening. Pierce's voice came through the door, muffled but sharp. Time. The man on the bed heard it too. His body tightened, shoulders rising, breath shifting into that controlled pattern again. In his eyes, the room changed. The door was no longer a hospital door. It was a perimeter, a breach point, the enemy line. Claire stepped between him and the door, without thinking, not blocking him, just placing herself where he could see her. "Look at me," she said. His gaze snapped to her. Claire felt her heartbeat thud, once heavy. She had 5 minutes and a dying man who believed sleep was a weapon. She had an arrogant doctor outside the door and security behind him. She had a tattoo that pulled her father's ghost into the room. Claire lowered her voice. "You said Unit 9. His lips moved barely. "We don't exist." Claire nodded slowly like she accepted the rule. "Then neither does my father's tattoo." His good eye widened a fraction. Claire leaned forward just enough for him to hear her over the storm, over the monitor, over his own fear. What was his call sign? The man stared at her, suspicion and desperation colliding. His mouth opened, closed. Then in a whisper that sounded like a confession, he said a single word. "Stonewall." Claire's breath caught in her throat. She kept her face steady, but her hands curled into fists against her thighs. Outside the door, Pierce's voice rose again. "Nurse Maddox, open the door." Claire did not move. The man's gaze locked onto the tattoo on his own arm as if it had started burning. Claire listened to the storm and the beeping monitor and the quiet terror that filled the space between them. She stood up slowly, as if sudden motion might break something fragile. "Stay right there," she said, and she did not sound like a nurse giving comfort. She sounded like someone giving an order. The door handle shook once more, harder this time. Claire looked at the door, then back at the man, and made a decision that felt like stepping off a ledge. She moved closer, not with force, but with certainty, bringing her voice down until it was only for him. "Whatever you think is hunting you," she said softly. "You don't get to die on my watch." The man's throat worked. His eyes shimmered with something that might have been gratitude, or grief, or both. Claire took one more step, close enough now to see the fine shake in his eyelashes, close enough to smell the iron and sweat on his skin. Close enough to be heard if she spoke in a whisper. The door handle went still. In the silence that followed, Claire opened her mouth. Claire let the silence settle again, thick as gauze pressed to a wound. The man's good eye stayed on her mouth like he was reading for tells, for slips, for the moment she became someone else. "Stonewall," she repeated, barely more than breath. His tapping stopped completely. The stillness that followed felt trained, not calm. A predator pausing. A soldier listening for the click of a trigger. Claire kept her hands visible. She did not reach for him. She did not reach for the IV kit. She stayed seated, letting him decide whether the distance between them was safe. "That name doesn't belong in here," he said. "It belonged in my house," Claire answered. "It belonged in the basement when the fireworks started. It belonged in my father's throat when he woke up choking on memories he never shared." His jaw tightened. "Your father never told you anything," no, Claire said. "He tried to make sure I never knew enough to get hurt." The man's gaze slid to her forearm, where her sleeve rode up, revealing pale skin and the faint shadow of an old scar. He looked like he wanted to ask where it came from, but he did not. He looked away, as if questions were liabilities. The door handle clicked once, then stopped. A hand rested there on the other side, a reminder that time was not a suggestion. Claire breathed in through her nose and felt the antiseptic sting at the back of her throat. "My father was Captain Michael Maddox," she said softly. "His call sign was Stonewall." The man stared at her. Something moved in his face, like a fracture spreading through glass. "Stonewall was dead," he whispered. "Stonewall didn't make it to the pickup." Claire felt her chest tighten. She kept her voice steady. "He came home. Not all the way, but he came home." The man's lips parted. His good eye shimmered with something that might have been grief or shock or both. He looked down at his hands as if he could not trust them. Claire leaned forward just a little. "He spent the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. He never told us why. He never told us who. He just taught me one thing." The man's gaze snapped back to her sharp again. "He taught you what?" Claire heard her father's voice in her memory, low and urgent, spoken once when she was 15 and too stubborn to stop asking questions. He had pulled her close in the kitchen after midnight, his hands shaking, and made her repeat a sentence until she could say it without thinking. He did not explain. He only said it was for a day she prayed would never come. She had not spoken it aloud since his funeral. Claire looked at the man on the bed and saw the same exhaustion she had seen in her father, the same tight control wrapped around a fear that never slept. He said, "If I ever met a man with your mark," Claire said, nodding toward the faded tattoo under his burn scar, "and I needed him to trust me, I had to give the countersign." The man went very still. His breathing changed. The controlled pattern faltered just for a second, like a radio signal slipping under interference. "There is no countersign," he said. Claire did not argue. She let the words sit between them. Then she lowered her voice until it could not travel beyond the bed rails. "I'm going to say it," she said. "You can decide if it's real." His fingers curled into the blanket. The tendons in his wrist stood out. Claire felt the air in the room cool not from temperature, but from attention. Like the whole space was listening. Claire leaned closer, stopping just outside arm's reach. She angled her head as if she were speaking to his ear, careful, deliberate. "The river runs black," she whispered, each word placed like a stitch, "but the hawk hunts midnight." For a heartbeat, the man did not move. His mouth stayed open as if he had forgotten how to close it. His good eye widened, and the hard edge in it shattered into something raw. He exhaled a sound that was almost a sob, almost a laugh, almost relief. "No," he breathed. "No, that's not possible." Claire held her position. She did not touch him. She waited. His lips trembled. His throat worked. Then he answered, voice broken, but certain, the way you answered your name. "The moon keeps no ledger." Claire closed her eyes for the briefest moment. When she opened them, his gaze was on her with a new kind of focus. Not suspicion, recognition. The kind that made a man lower his weapon. Claire nodded once. "Permission to treat Sergeant." He swallowed hard. The fight left his shoulders like someone had unhooked a heavy pack. "Granted," he whispered. "You are medical." The door handle rattled again. Claire did not look away from him. "I need you to do something for me." His gaze held steady. "Order." "Breathe with me," Claire said. 4 in, hold, 6 out. He hesitated, then followed. 4, hold, 6. His tremor did not stop, but his breathing found the rhythm again, this time guided, not defensive. Claire reached slowly to the bedside cart and pulled out a saline flush. She held it up where he could see it. "This is not sleep." His eyes tracked the object. "Needle." "I know," Claire said. "I will not surprise you. I will tell you before I do anything. If you want me to stop, you say stop. If you want me to continue, you say continue." He stared at her a long moment, then gave a small nod. Claire turned her chair slightly so her hands stayed in his view. She opened the IV start kit with quiet movements. No tearing plastic. No sudden snaps. She spoke as she worked, keeping her voice low and even, letting the sound anchor him. "I'm going to clean your arm," she said. "Cold alcohol, then a small stick. Then it's done." His jaw tightened, but he did not pull away. He kept breathing with her count. Claire swabbed his skin. His muscles jumped at the sensation, but he held. She saw sweat bead at his temple and slide down the deep line beside his nose. The door handle went still. Silence pressed in again. Claire anchored the vein with 2 fingers, careful not to pinch. His skin was thin veins, ropey and reluctant. Dehydrated, the kind of access that made new nurses sweat. "I'm going in," she said. His eyes locked on her face, not her hands. "Do it." The catheter slid in, a flash of blood. Claire advanced, withdrew the needle, secured the line. She moved quickly now, but not rushed, as if speed might trigger him. When she taped it down, his breath shuddered out of him. He had not flinched. Claire connected the saline. The drip chamber filled. The fluid began to run. His shoulders sagged, the smallest collapse of tension that looked like surrender. Claire met his eyes. "Good," she said. "You did good." His lips moved around words he seemed afraid to say. "You are Stonewall's." Claire nodded. "His daughter." The man's face cracked. A grief so old it had calcified in his bones shifted loose again. "Stonewall saved my life," he whispered. "In the mangroves. 83. I was pinned. He dragged me out by my collar like I weighed nothing." Claire felt tears sting the backs of her eyes, but she kept her hands steady on the IV tubing. "He never told me. He never would," the man said. That was the point. The door flew open. Dr. Nolan Pierce stormed in with 2 security guards behind him, radios crackling. Pierce's face was hard with righteous anger, the look of a man convinced he had been made a fool. "Time's up," Pierce snapped. "Step away from the patient." Claire did not move. She lifted one hand, palm outward. "He has an IV. He's getting fluids and antibiotics." Pierce's eyes flicked to the line taped to the man's arm. His expression flashed with surprise, then hardened again, as if surprise was an insult. "One of you hold him," Pierce said to security. "If he twitches, we sedate." The man on the bed lifted his head. The transformation in him was immediate. His voice dropped into a calm register that carried authority like weight. "Stand down," he said. Pierce froze. Not from fear of violence, but from the tone. The certainty. It was the voice of someone who had given orders in places where refusing meant people died. Pierce's chin lifted. "Sir, you are not in command here." The man's good eye fixed on him. "You are not my medical." Pierce blinked. "Excuse me?" The man turned his head slightly toward Claire, then back to Pierce, as if drawing a line on a map. "Nurse Maddox is the designated medical officer," he said. "No one else comes within 3 feet of this bed. If you cross that line, I treat it as aggression." One guard shifted uncertainly. The other glanced at Pierce, as if asking whether they were really doing this. Pierce's cheeks flushed. "This is a hospital, not a combat zone." The man's mouth tightened into something like a smile, but there was no warmth in it. "Hospitals are where you finish people quietly." Claire watched Pierce's eyes narrow. His pride bristled. His training fought to reassert control, but the monitor was calming. The heart rate had dropped into the 120s. Still fast, but moving toward stable. Pierce looked at Claire, then at the man. "If he becomes violent, this ends." Claire nodded. "If he becomes violent, I will handle it." Pierce hesitated, then motioned the guards back a step. He did not like it, but he did it. The door remained open, now the hallway light spilling into the room like a threat. Claire lowered her voice. "Doctor, I need cefepime and vancomycin. Stat. Blood cultures if he allows it." Pierce's brows lifted. She heard the surprise in his silence. She had named the antibiotics without checking a chart because she did not need one. She could smell sepsis on a room. Pierce recovered quickly, masking it with irritation. "Fine." He stalked out guards, trailing him radios, murmuring. The door stayed ajar. When the room quieted again, Claire turned back to the man. His eyelids were heavier now. The fluid running into him softened the sharpest edges of his tremor. His breathing remained controlled, but exhaustion pulled at it like gravity. Claire adjusted the blanket, keeping her movements slow. "You have a name," Claire said. "Tell me." He stared at the ceiling tiles, then at the corner near the curtain track, as if checking for an invisible listener. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Harlan Tate," he said. Claire nodded as if she were receiving routine patient information. She did not react with awe. She did not ask for spelling. She did not make it a moment bigger than he could handle. "Harlan," she said. "Okay." His good eye drifted to her face. "You have to listen," "I am Claire," replied. He swallowed the motion painful. "The countersign." Claire's stomach tightened. "What about it?" "You said it out loud," he whispered. "You should not have." Claire kept her tone steady. "It was only between us." Harlan's gaze sharpened with a fear that was not fever. "Nothing is only between you and me." Claire held his wrist lightly, not gripping, just making contact a grounding point. His skin was hot and damp. "What are you saying?" she asked. Harlan's mouth worked. He looked like he was deciding whether to hand her a live grenade. "That phrase is a flare," he whispered. "If it gets spoken, the wrong people hear about it. They start listening. They start watching. They come to see who still remembers." Claire felt a chill crawl up her spine. She did not like how much his fear sounded like experience. "Who?" she asked quietly. Harlan's eyes drifted shut, then snapped open again, as if he could not afford sleep. His hand tightened around hers with surprising strength. "Adrian Cross," he said. The name came out like ash. "We called him the Pale Rider." Claire watched his pulse on the monitor and felt it surge again, his heart reacting to the name like it was poison. "He is not dead," Harlan whispered. "He does not forget. He does not forgive." Claire held her voice low even. "Why would he be here?" Harlan's lips trembled. His gaze flicked to the IV tubing to the needle site, then away as if ashamed that he had let it happen. "Because I have something," he said. "And because you said the words." Claire's mind ran through the hospital, cameras in the hall, badge readers, visitor logs, security desk. She thought of how easy it was for someone with the right suit and the right confidence to walk through doors that were not meant for them. Claire kept her face calm. "You are safe in this room." Harlan's good eye met hers with something close to pity. No room is safe when Cross wants it. His eyelids fluttered. The antibiotics had not started yet, but the fluid was taking the sharpest edge off the fever. Exhaustion pressed down on him. Claire checked his leg dressing again. The swelling was worse than she liked. The skin around it was angry and hot. "I need to look at your leg," she said. Harlan's gaze drifted to the door. "Don't leave." "I won't," Claire said. "I'll do it here." She gathered supplies, keeping one eye on his face. When she knelt by the bed, she moved carefully, making sure he could see her hands. Harlan's breathing hitched as she peeled back the dressing. The wound beneath was ugly, angry, and deep. The edges looked like they had been chewed. The smell rose stronger now, unmistakable. Claire cleaned it gently, her gloved fingers steady. Harlan clenched his jaw, but did not pull away. He stared at the ceiling tiles and whispered something under his breath. Claire caught fragments, numbers, directions, names that meant nothing to her. Not yet. She rewrapped the wound, then stood and washed her hands at the sink. When she turned back, Harlan's eyes were half closed. "Stay awake," Claire said softly. He tried to smile. It did not reach his eyes. "I have been awake for 30 years. Claire moved to the medication pump as Pierce returned less storming, now pushing a cart with antibiotics and a phlebotomy kit. He kept his eyes on his work jaw tight, as if looking at her might cost him dignity. "I need cultures," Pierce said. Claire glanced at Harlan. "Do you allow it?" Harlan's eyes opened wary, "Needle." Claire nodded. "It is a needle. It is also information. It tells us what is killing you." Harlan looked at the syringe and the vials. His breathing sped. His hands flexed on the blanket. Claire leaned in, voice low. "You decide." For a long moment, he stared at the supplies. Then he looked at Claire. "One," he said. "Only you." Pierce's head snapped up. "This is not negotiable." Claire's voice stayed calm. "It is. It is his body." Pierce's nostrils flared, but he stepped back, letting Claire take the needle. His eyes held a warning. He was holding his anger like a scalpel. Claire drew the blood herself, quick and smooth. Harlan flinched just once, and then forced himself still. Claire filled the tubes, labeled them, and pressed gauze to the puncture site. "Done," she said. Harlan exhaled through clenched teeth. "Do not do that again." "I will not unless you say," Claire replied. Pierce hung the antibiotics and adjusted the pump movements brisk. When he finished, he looked at the monitor, then at Harlan, then at Claire. "If he becomes unstable," Pierce said, "I will sedate." Claire met his gaze. "If he becomes unstable, you will call me first." Pierce did not answer. He left the room, the cart wheels squeaking as they rolled away. The door eased shut behind him, but not all the way. It stayed slightly ajar, a thin line of hallway light cutting across the floor. Harlan's eyes drifted shut again. His grip on the blanket loosened. The medicine began to flow in quiet drops, and the hard lines in his face softened. Claire stood beside the bed, watching his vitals settle. His heart rate eased lower, still too fast, but trending down. His oxygen stayed steady. His blood pressure remained fragile. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt a pressure behind her ribs that would not ease. She looked at the tattoo on Harlan's forearm again, the faded ink under the burn scar. Night shape, lightning mark. A symbol that did not belong to a dock supervisor or a construction worker or an alley collapse. Claire's mind returned to his words. No room is safe. She checked the IV site again, then the antibiotic tubing, then the leg dressing. Her eyes moved the way they always did, searching for what could kill a patient while everyone else looked away. Her gaze drifted downward to the line of Harlan's abdomen beneath the hospital gown. The fabric sat oddly creased too high on one side, as if something underneath it did not match the chart. Claire hesitated. She listened. The hall was quiet. The storm pressed on the windows. She reached for the edge of the gown, fingers careful, and lifted it just enough to see skin. A dark stain spread across the gauze near his lower ribs. Not from the leg. Not from a needle. Claire's breath caught. Beneath the gauze, hidden by hurried tape, a row of rough stitches cut across his flesh in a line too clean to be an accident and too crude to be done in any hospital. The thread was not surgical. It was thick and pale like fishing line. Claire's hand froze in midair as the monitor beeped on steady and indifferent, and Harlan Tate slept for the first time in a long time, with his face turned toward the door like he was still guarding it. Claire kept the edge of the gown pinched between her fingers as if letting go would make the truth disappear. The gauze was clean on top. The tape was tidy. Whoever had dressed it wanted it to look harmless. But the stitches beneath told a different story. Thick line, uneven bites, the kind of closure you did in the dark with hands that could not afford to shake. Fishing line. Claire lowered the gown slowly and stood there for a moment with her gloved hand hovering above Harlan's abdomen. The monitors continued their calm narration of a body trying to survive. Heart rate easing, oxygen steady, blood pressure thin as paper. In the hall, a cartwheel squeaked and faded away. A door clicked. Somewhere distant, a patient coughed and the sound echoed down polished tile. Claire's mind ran two tracks at once. The nurse in her wanted to call a surgeon and rip the dressing off and assess for internal bleeding and infection and everything that could turn catastrophic before sunrise. The woman in her heard Harlan's voice, heard the words handler eyes, heard the way he had said hospitals finish people quietly. She stepped away from the bed and moved to the doorway. She glanced into the hall. The nurses' station sat under fluorescent light screens, glowing staff moving in short, efficient paths. Dr. Pierce was at a computer, with his shoulders hunched and his jaw tight, entering orders with the intensity of a man trying to erase a mistake by working harder. Two security guards stood near the station, one rubbing his thigh where Harlan had kicked him, both pretending they were not rattled. Claire pulled the door closed until it latched. The click sounded too loud. Inside, she washed her hands again, even though she was still gloved. A habit. A ritual. Something to do while her thoughts tried not to panic. State law, she remembered. Mandatory reporting. If a patient presented with a gunshot wound, the hospital was required to notify law enforcement. It was not optional. It was not a suggestion. It was policy pinned to every staff bulletin board and repeated during orientation like a prayer. Claire stared at Harlan's sleeping face. He looked older in rest, the hard lines softening into something almost gentle. The fever had carved him down, but it had not taken the stubborn set of his mouth. She thought of her father, of the way he would go silent when police sirens passed the house. Not fear like a guilty man. Fear like someone who knew how easily power could be turned into a weapon. Claire moved to the bedside cart and checked the medication pump again. Antibiotics hung and ran. Fluids dripped with steady patience. She checked the IV site, the tape, the catheter angle. She checked his pulse with 2 fingers on his wrist, feeling the frantic beat trying to calm itself. Then she looked at the abdomen dressing again. She could call Dr. Pierce right now. She could call the attending surgeon, the charge nurse for the hospital, the administrator on call. She could do the safe thing, the legal thing. But Harlan had not come here seeking care. He had been dragged here by the storm and fate and an ambulance. He had arrived like a man who had been trying to avoid doors like this for a lifetime. Claire crossed to the sink and braced her palms on the cool porcelain edge. The sound of water in the pipes was faint. The storm outside pressed against the building like a living thing. She made a decision in the same quiet way she had made 100 urgent decisions before. Not dramatic, not proud, just clear. She pulled a fresh abdominal pad from the supply drawer and peeled open the packaging with controlled hands. She lifted the edge of the gown again, exposing the crude stitches long enough for her to work. She did not stare. She did not judge. She simply covered the evidence with clean white gauze and taped it down as if it belonged there, as if it had always been there, as if it were nothing more than a dressing for a scrape. She smoothed the tape, then lowered the gown. Her voice came out in a whisper, meant for herself. Construction injury. She crossed to the chart binder on the wall and flipped it open. Harlan Tate. Found down. Suspected fall. Leg wound infected. Possible sepsis. Possible toxic exposure. The story was thin, but the hospital was full of thin stories that night. People came in and said whatever made them feel safe. Claire picked up a pen and wrote in neat block letters where the assessment summary sat. Abrasion, lower abdomen, dressing intact. No active bleed. She stared at the words and felt her stomach knot. She was lying in ink. She was lying in a system built on truth. She capped the pen and slid it back into the holder. Harlan stirred his eyelids, fluttering. Claire turned toward him instantly. His good eye opened. It focused on her sharp. He did not look drugged. He looked like a man who had trained himself to wake fast. You saw it, he murmured. Claire kept her face calm. Yes. He swallowed and winced, a hand drifting toward his side beneath the gown. You should not have seen it. I am a nurse, Claire said. Seeing is part of the job. Harlan gave a dry exhale. Then you know why I did not want the needle. Claire held his gaze. Tell me what happened. He hesitated, eyes darting toward the door, as if he could hear conversations through walls. Close the blinds. Claire crossed to the window and pulled the blinds down, cutting off the dark shimmer of stormlight. The room became smaller, safer. She returned to the chair and sat where he could see her hands. Now, she said. Harlan's throat worked. I was not coming here. Claire waited. I was heading north, he said, words slow, deliberate. Border, Canada, off-grid. Why, Claire asked. Harlan's good eye tightened. Because people do not stop hunting you when you are useful. Claire felt the weight of that. She kept her voice steady. Who shot you? For a moment, his expression hardened into something like hatred, but it was a quiet hatred, cold and controlled. We called him the Pale Rider, Harlan whispered. Real name is Adrian Cross. Claire held still. The name sounded like any name. That was the problem with monsters. They rarely sounded like monsters. Harlan continued, eyes fixed on the ceiling tile above her head, as if looking at her would make him say too much. Back then, he was logistics, a man with clean hands and clean paperwork. He moved supplies. He learned how to move other things. What things, Claire asked. Harlan's lips curled. Weapons, drugs, intel, whatever paid, whatever won favors. He used our unit as his transport. We thought we were running a mission. We were hauling his fortune. Claire's fingers tightened on her own knee. Unit 9. Harlan's gaze flicked to her. A flash of warning. Do not call it that. Claire softened her voice. The unit that does not exist. Harlan nodded once. We did not exist on paper. That made us perfect. Claire felt nausea rise in her throat, not from gore, but from the shape of the story forming. How did you find out? Harlan's jaw clenched. Stonewall suspected. Claire's breath caught at her father's call sign in Harlan's mouth. He saw patterns, Harlan said. He heard things on the wrong channels. He found numbers in the manifests that did not match the cargo. He tried to radio command. The radios went to static. Jammed, Claire whispered. Harlan nodded. Cross jammed them. Then he left us. Claire leaned forward. Left you where? Harlan's voice went flat. In the mangroves, in a place where maps lie. He left us to be overrun so there would be no witnesses. Claire felt heat behind her eyes. She forced herself to breathe through it. My father said he got separated, she said quietly. Harlan's good eye hardened. That is what survivors say when the truth gets people killed. It was not separation. It was execution. Claire looked away for a second, swallowing hard, then looked back at him. How many? Harlan's gaze drifted downward to his hands. His finger tapped once against the blanket. A single beat. Most, he said. Silence filled the room, thick with the kind of grief that had no place in an ICU but lived there anyway. Claire spoke again, voice low. And the ledger. Harlan's eyes narrowed. He glanced at the door. You sure no one is listening? There is no one in this room but us, Claire said. He gave a rough half laugh. That is what I used to tell myself. Claire did not flinch. Where is it? Harlan's hand moved slowly toward his jacket folded over a chair in the corner. In the Zippo. Claire's eyes followed his hand. She crossed to the chair and lifted the tattered canvas jacket. It smelled like rain diesel and old smoke. As she moved it, something heavy slid from an inner pocket and clinked onto the tile. A silver Zippo lighter. Claire picked it up. It was scratched cold and heavier than it should have been. She flipped it open on instinct. The wheel spun uselessly. No spark, no flint. She turned it over in her palm and felt the seam. Too clean. Too deliberate. Harlan watched her hands like he was watching surgery. Open it. Claire glanced at him. This is yours. It is yours now, Harlan said. If Cross finds me, he will find it. Claire used her thumbnail to pry at the bottom plate. It popped free with a soft click. Inside, wrapped in oil paper, was a tiny rectangle of black plastic, a micro SD card. Claire's mouth went dry. This is the ledger. Harlan nodded, a small movement that cost him pain. Digital copy. The paper burned overseas years ago. I kept backups. I knew they would come to scrub the history. Claire held the card between two fingers. It felt impossibly light for something that could get people killed. Who else knows you have it? She asked. Harlan's good eye narrowed. Cross knows the unit had records. He does not know where I hid them. That is why I stayed awake. That is why I would not let anyone touch me. Claire's mind snapped back to his terror at the needle. Because a needle is quiet. Harlan's lips pressed together. A needle does not leave a bullet hole. It leaves a story. Heart stopped. Complications. Bad luck. Claire felt cold spread down her spine. You said he killed others. Harlan's gaze drifted to the monitor. He does not like loose ends. Claire thought of her father again. Of the silence. Of the way he never spoke names. Harlan's voice dropped. Stonewall crawled out. I crawled out. 2 more crawled out. We scattered. Changed names. Worked jobs that did not look like war. But Cross rose. He turned his blood money into contracts. Consulting. Defense work. He polished his reputation until it shined. And now, Claire said. Harlan's jaw tightened. He is being considered for an appointment. Big enough that reporters ask questions. Big enough that hearings happen. If the Senate sees what he did, he falls. Claire held the micro SD like it might burn her. So he is cleaning. Harlan nodded once. He is making sure nobody can testify. Nobody can leak. Nobody can remember. Claire's grip tightened. And you got shot. Harlan's face pinched. Near the rail yard. I thought I lost him. Storm helped. I bled and blacked out in an alley. Then I woke up here. Claire's mind raced. The ambulance. Intake. The chart. Security camera footage. Visitor logs. If Cross was even half as connected as Harlan said, the hospital was not a refuge. It was a beacon. Harlan watched her face change and his voice softened. I am sorry. Claire looked up. For what? For bringing it to your door, Harlan said. The words sounded like they had been sitting in his throat for years, waiting for someone innocent enough to hear them. You did not ask for this, Claire swallowed. I asked for truth the moment I stepped between that syringe and your arm. Harlan's gaze sharpened. Then you need to do something with it. Claire hesitated. Harlan's voice grew urgent, pushing through exhaustion. You take that card. You give it to someone with a platform. A real one. The press. National. Big enough that Cross cannot bury it quietly. Claire's mind flashed to hospital policy, to chain of command, to the police number on the wall, to the way systems failed when the wrong people owned them. Harlan watched her struggle. Not local police, he added, as if reading her thoughts. Cross buys local. He buys silence. He buys time. Claire held the card and felt the room tilt. I cannot just walk out with evidence. Harlan's laugh was harsh. You already did. You put your hands on my wound and did not call it in. Claire's throat tightened. She looked away, then back. That was to keep you alive. That keeps you alive too, Harlan said. Because if Cross learns you saw it, you become part of the cleanup. Claire felt her pulse rise. Where is he now? Harlan's good eye held hers, and the fear in it was not fever anymore. Close. Claire stared at the door. At that exact moment, the overhead speaker in the hallway crackled. A calm female voice filled the ICU, too smooth for the words it carried. Code Gray. Main lobby. Security to the main lobby. Code Gray. Claire stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. Harlan went rigid, every muscle in his body drawing tight despite sepsis and pain. His eyes widened, the soldier snapping awake behind the exhaustion. He is here, Harlan whispered. Claire felt a cold pinch behind her ribs. Code Gray could be anything. Combative visitor, domestic dispute, someone drunk. Harlan's mouth twisted. That sound, that announcement. It means someone is at the gate. Claire looked down at the micro SD card in her hand. She moved without thinking, sliding it back into the Zippo, snapping the bottom plate into place with a click that sounded final. She shoved the lighter into the front pocket of her scrubs and pressed her palm over it as if her body could hide it. Harlan's gaze flicked to the door again. Hide it, where God cannot find it. Stop, Claire whispered. Breathe. Harlan's breathing went shallow, fast. His eyes tracked the room again, looking for angles, exits, weapons. Claire moved to the door and cracked it open a fraction. The hallway was busier now. Nurses at the station looked up, heads turning toward the elevators. One security guard already had his hand on his radio. Dr. Pierce stood near the desk, irritation on his face, as if Code Gray had insulted his schedule. He caught Claire's eye and lifted his chin in silent question. Claire did not answer. She closed the door again. The storm outside deepened, rain slashing the window blinds hard enough to rattle them. Claire turned back to Harlan. If someone comes in here, you do not move. Harlan's lips parted in disbelief. Do not move. You will tear your line, Claire said. You will crash. You stay on the bed. Harlan's good eye narrowed. That bed is a coffin. Claire's voice went firm. It is a bed. I keep you alive in it. Harlan stared at her. Then he gave a small nod, the kind you gave when you accepted an order you hated. The overhead speaker crackled again, repeating the code Gray. The words traveled like a warning down every hall in the building. Claire's gaze dropped to Harlan's jacket in the corner. She crossed the room, grabbed it, and shoved it into the closet, burying it behind spare blankets and linens. If anyone searched the room, she wanted the room to look like a room, not like a man's life, in a bag. She returned to the bedside, adjusted the blanket, checked the IV pump, checked the antibiotics again. Her hands moved in routine, but her mind stayed sharp. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. Not the quick squeak of nurses, not the shuffle of exhausted residents. Slow, heavy, measured. Leather on tile. Claire felt the hair on her arms rise. She moved to the door and pressed her ear against it, listening. Voices at the nurses' station. A man speaking in a tone that did not ask for permission. A second voice answering, uncertain. Then another voice, familiar, clipped, annoyed. Dr. Pierce. Claire held her breath. Through the door, she heard Pierce's words sharper now. This is a restricted unit. You cannot be here. A reply came smooth and calm, each syllable placed with care. Dr. Pierce, correct. I am Agent Cross. We are here for the patient in 7B. Claire's stomach dropped. Harlan's whisper came from behind her, barely audible. Pale rider. Claire closed her eyes for half a heartbeat, then opened them and turned back toward the bed. Harlan was sitting up now, IV line tugging, fever bright in his face, his body moving on pure adrenaline. He looked like a man dragging himself upright in a foxhole. Claire crossed to him and pressed her hand to his shoulder, firm. Stay. Harlan's good eye locked on hers. You should have let me die. Claire shook her head once. No. Outside, Pierce's voice rose. You do not have jurisdiction without a warrant. A pause. Then the smooth voice again, softer, almost amused. Show him. A dull thump followed, heavy and final, like a body hitting a desk. Then another sound, a softer collapse. Someone gasped. A woman's voice, panicked. Doctor. Claire's heart slammed against her ribs. She looked at the door as if she could see through it. Harlan's face went utterly still. He does not argue. He whispered. He erases. Claire moved fast. She reached for the chair near the wall and dragged it to the door, wedging it under the handle. Not a fortress. Not even a real barricade. Just something that would slow a hand for a second. Harlan's breathing turned controlled, again sharp inhales through the nose, measured exhales through clenched teeth. His eyes darted to the equipment in the room, to the metal IV pole, to the plastic pitcher, to anything that could become weight and force. Claire's hand slid into her scrub pocket fingers, closing around the Zippo. Cold metal. Hard edges. Proof. In the hallway, the smooth voice spoke again, closer now, and Claire heard the faint edge of threat under the polish. Nurse, point me to 7B. Another voice trembling. The smooth voice cut in quiet and deadly. Now. Claire heard footsteps shift, then begin moving down the hall. Slow, heavy, measured. The chair under the door handle creaked as pressure tested it. Claire stood at the bedside with her palm still on Harlan's shoulder, her other hand gripping cold metal in her pocket. The latch rattled once, then again. Harlan's gaze met hers steady now in a way that made him look less like a patient and more like a man waiting for a breach. Claire did not speak. She only moved closer to the bed, putting her body between Harlan and the door, and listened as the handle turned. The chair wedged under the handle groaned again, wood protesting against steel. Claire felt the vibration travel up her forearm and settle in her teeth. Harlan's hand slid off the blanket and wrapped around the IV pole. Not to pull it closer, to claim it. His knuckles were pale tendons standing out like cord. "Claire," he whispered. "I know," she said, and kept her voice quiet enough that it belonged only to this room. The latch clicked. The chair jumped a fraction of an inch across the tile. Claire planted her foot against it, bracing, jaw clenched. The handle turned again, more patient this time, as if the person on the other side had all the time in the world. Then the pressure stopped. Silence. Claire held her breath, listening. A soft scrape. Not on the handle, on the edge of the door. A thin sound of something hard slipping into the seam, searching for purchase. A lockpick. Harlan's good eye met hers, and the fear there was not fever. It was recognition. He mouthed two words without sound. "Too clean." Claire's hand tightened around the Zippo in her pocket. Cold metal bit into her palm. The door shook once more. A calm voice drifted through the crack beneath it, close enough that Claire could hear the faint smile in it. Nurse Maddox, Adrian Cross said as if he had been invited. "Open the door." Claire did not answer. The voice remained gentle. "You can make this simple." Harlan's fingers tapped the IV pole once, a single sharp beat. He looked toward the wall to the right of the bed, where the red fire alarm pull station sat at the end of the corridor beyond the door. His gaze flicked back to Claire. Claire shook her head once, almost imperceptible. The lockpick scraped again, then paused. The handle turned. The latch clicked free. The chair held for half a second, then shifted. The door opened 2 inches and caught on the chair leg. A sliver of hallway light cut into the room. Claire stepped forward, placing herself in the gap shoulder against the door. She pressed her palm flat on the edge, pushing it closed with her body weight. Through the slit, she saw a sliver of a suit. Charcoal fabric, crisp white cuff. A hand that looked too neat for a hospital at this hour. Adrian Cross spoke again, still calm. "You are very loyal to your father. That is admirable." Claire kept her mouth shut. Behind her, Harlan's breathing tightened, controlled and sharp, like he was trying to turn pain into focus. Cross continued, voice drifting like perfume. "I did not come to hurt you. I came to retrieve what does not belong here." Claire answered without raising her volume. "This is an ICU. That is why it is convenient," Cross replied. Claire felt her pulse hammer. She glanced back at Harlan and saw him shifting his legs off the side of the bed, moving with slow precision despite the tremor in his hands. He was fragile, but the part of him that had survived did not believe fragility mattered. Claire turned back to the door. "You cannot be here." Cross laughed softly. "You keep saying that." A second shape appeared in the slit of light. A broad shoulder, tactical fabric, black glove. Cross spoke to someone behind him, voice still pleasant. "Remove the obstruction." The gloved hand slipped into the crack and shoved. The door pressed against Claire's shoulder, hard enough to make her ribs ache. She set her feet, muscles straining. The chair squealed across the tile. Claire's eyes snapped to Harlan. He had the IV pole lifted now, not high, not swinging, just held at an angle like a spear. He shook his head once, slow. Not yet. Claire's mouth went dry. The gloved hand shoved again. The chair shifted. The door opened wider, forcing Claire back a step. She saw Cross clearly now. He stood in the hallway in a suit that looked built for boardrooms, not storms. Silver hair neatly combed. Rimless glasses that caught the fluorescent light and hid his eyes in a clean reflection. His face was composed, almost bored, as if this were a late meeting that should have ended earlier. Two men stood behind him, thick necks, tactical jackets with patches that did not mean anything. Their hands were low and ready, not panicked. Efficient. Cross tilted his head slightly. Claire Maddox, the daughter of Captain Maddox. Stonewall. Claire did not flinch at the name. She refused to give him that satisfaction. "You hurt my doctor," she said. Cross's mouth curved. "He is sleeping. He will wake with a headache and a story he will not tell." Claire's jaw tightened. "Get out." Cross looked past her into the room, eyes landing on Harlan's shape in the dim light. A softness touched his expression, something like fondness. Harlan Tate Cross said, "You always did prefer the dramatic exit." Harlan's voice was hoarse, but steady. "You always did prefer other people to die for you." Cross sighed as if disappointed. "We are in a hospital. Must we do this in front of the staff?" Claire's hand slid behind her back, fingers brushing the fire alarm pole inside the room that hung beside the doorway. She did not grab it yet. Cross's gaze returned to Claire. "Hand me the old man and you walk away. You go back to your clean life." Claire heard Harlan inhale sharply. He was bracing. "He is my patient," Claire said. Cross's smile faded. "He is my loose end." His hand moved into his suit jacket. Claire felt the room narrow, her muscles tensed. Cross pulled out a suppressed pistol, black and small, like a tool you kept in a drawer for quiet work. The sightline of it lifted toward Claire's chest, with no tremor. Behind him, one of the tactical men shifted, ready to move the moment Cross decided. Claire's throat tightened. She kept her feet planted in the doorway, body blocking the view into the room. "Step aside," Cross said. Claire did not move. Cross's voice softened. "I am trying to be courteous." Harlan's voice came from behind her, lower now. "Claire." She did not look back. Cross raised the pistol a fraction higher. "Last chance." Claire's fingers closed around the fire alarm pole, still not yanking it. The metal edge cut into her skin through the glove. Harlan's voice sharpened. "Drop." Claire did not understand for half a second. Then she saw Harlan's eyes flick toward her feet. Claire dropped to the floor, folding down fast, curling near the base of the doorframe, arms over her head. The suppressed gun cracked. The sound was not loud, but it was sharp in the hallway, a violent snap that made the air jump. The bullet hit the doorframe above where her head had been and splintered tile dust into her hair. Claire pressed her face against the floor and tasted disinfectant. A second shot snapped. Then metal screeched. Harlan kicked the IV pole. It shot forward from the room into the hallway like a battering ram. Oxygen tubing looped around its base, dragged an overturned tray table behind it, the whole rig skidding across tile in a tangled, heavy mass. Cross stepped back with a flicker of irritation, suit jacket shifting. The tactical men moved to flank, but the skidding metal forced them to adjust. Claire scrambled on her hands and knees toward the hall wall, where the red fire alarm pull station waited 3 feet away. "Stop her," Cross said, voice flat. A black-gloved hand grabbed the back of Claire's scrub top and yanked. Fabric bit into her throat. Claire gasped, fingers slipping off the floor. She reached for the alarm and came up, short nails scraping tile. Harlan appeared in the doorway, ghost pale in his gown, a V-line trailing like a tether. He lifted the plastic water pitcher with both hands. For a split second, Claire saw his tremor, the weakness in his wrists. Then he threw. The pitcher hit the tactical man square in the face with a wet crack shattering into jagged shards. The man screamed and released Claire, hands flying to his eyes. Claire lunged forward and seized the fire alarm pole. She yanked. The corridor erupted. A shriek filled the air, high and relentless. Strobe lights began to pulse, turning the ICU hallway into violent flashes of white and shadow. Doors cracked open. Staff cried out. Someone yelled for security. Claire's ears rang instantly. The sound vibrated in her skull. Harlan grabbed her wrist. His grip was iron, but slick with sweat. Move. Claire staggered to her feet, hauling him with her. You are still on an IV. Then carry it, he rasped. They ran half stumbling, half dragging, toward the stairwell door at the end of the hall. The strobe flashes made distance lie. Cross's men moved behind them like shadows between bursts of light. Claire heard Cross's voice cut through the alarm, calm and furious. Lock the stairwell. They reached the door. Claire slammed her shoulder into it and pushed. It burst open into concrete darkness, broken by emergency lighting. The alarm's wail became a distorted echo in the stairwell shaft. They plunged downward. Harlan's weight became real the moment they hit the stairs. The adrenaline that had lifted him out of bed was already burning out. He leaned hard against Claire, breath ragged, one hand clutching his side beneath the gown. Claire wrapped his arm over her shoulders and pulled. Her shoes slipped once on wet concrete. Leave me, Harlan wheezed. Claire gritted her teeth. Shut up. Harlan made a harsh sound that might have been a laugh. You do not have the body for this. Claire shoved him down another step. I have the will. Above them, heavy boots hit the stairwell, quick and controlled. Not staff, not security. Cross's men. Claire's lungs burned. The alarm's echo made it hard to hear exact distance, but she could feel them gaining. At the first floor landing, Harlan stumbled, his knees buckled. Claire tightened her grip, pulling him up. Eyes on me. Harlan's face was drenched sweat and rain and fever. His good eye met hers, and for a second it was almost gentle. You really are Stonewalls, he said. Claire pushed him toward the door, marked authorized personnel only. High voltage and medical gas storage. A heavy steel door with a crash bar. Claire threw her weight into it. The door opened into the basement's mechanical heart. Cool air rushed out, smelling of metal oil and something faintly sweet. The hum of machines filled the space, low and constant. Boilers hissed somewhere in the dark. Thick bundles of wire ran along the ceiling like veins. Pipes sweated condensation that dripped in slow, steady taps. Rows of tall green oxygen tanks stood in a chain-link cage in the corner, each one marked with warnings in bold red letters. Harlan sagged against the wall, breathing hard. The alarm's wail was muffled down here, still present, but distant enough to think. Claire looked around, eyes scanning for exits. A maintenance hatch, a corridor, a ladder. Harlan's gaze went straight to the breaker panel on the far wall, a gray box with industrial levers. Next to it, a transfer switch for the generator. The breaker, Harlan said. Claire stared at him. What are you doing? Buying time, he said. His voice was rough, but there was a strange steadiness in it now. The soldier had taken control of the panic. They have optics. Darkness alone will not help. Claire heard the basement door above them rattle. Open 3 tanks, Harlan said. Claire's eyes snapped to the oxygen cage. No, that is a bomb. Harlan's good eye held hers. It is a room full of breath. Make it too much breath and it becomes fire. Claire's stomach twisted. This is insane. Harlan coughed, bending forward, and blood flecked his lips. He wiped it with the back of his hand like it was nothing. I am dying, he said. This is a hospital. They will be gentle while they kill me. I refuse. Claire's hand went to her scrub pocket. She felt the hard shape of the Zippo and remembered the micro SD inside. The weight of it was suddenly heavier than any oxygen tank. Harlan's voice softened just a fraction. You keep that safe. Claire pulled the Zippo out. Her fingers shook. Harlan reached and took it, then pressed it back into her hand. You hold it. Not me. They search bodies. They search beds. The basement door above them burst open. 3 tactical men flooded in, rifles up, laser dots dancing across pipes and walls. Their lights cut through the dim space. Hard beams. Behind them, Adrian Cross walked in, unhurried, pistol still in hand, handkerchief now held lightly against his nose, as if the basement air offended him. His eyes swept the room and landed on Harlan. End of the road, Cross said. Harlan pushed away from the wall, forcing himself upright. His hospital gown hung loose, stained with sweat and blood. He looked like a ruined statue that refused to fall. I am not running, Harlan said. Cross's smile returned thin. You are bleeding inside a building full of witnesses. This ends quietly. Claire stepped slightly in front of Harlan, body angled, heart hammering. This is a hospital. Cross looked at her like she was repeating a fact he had already accounted for. Hospitals are designed for containment. Doors, locks, compliance. One of Cross's men raised his rifle. The red laser dot crawled up Harlan's chest. Harlan's gaze flicked to Claire's face. His breathing slowed, deliberate. Listen, he whispered, so only she could hear over the distant alarm. Wrench. Cage. 3 valves. All the way open. Claire shook her head barely. You will kill everyone down here. There is no one down here but us, Harlan said. And them. Cross's voice cut through. Hand me the lighter. Hand me the man. You walk away, nurse. Claire's jaw clenched. You killed my father. Cross did not react. His face remained composed, as if the accusation was a minor inconvenience. Your father died a long time ago. Harlan's voice went cold. He crawled out. You failed. For the first time, something flickered in Cross's expression. Not anger. Annoyance. Take him, Cross said. The tactical men moved forward. Harlan's voice snapped sharp as a command. Mark. Claire did not understand at first. Then her eyes went to the breaker lever, the massive red-handled switch labeled Main Utility Cutoff. Harlan's gaze locked on her. His lips moved silently. Now. Claire ran. Her shoes slapped concrete. She reached the breaker panel and wrapped both hands around the red lever. It was stiff, built for strength. Her muscles strained. Behind her, rifles shifted. A man shouted. Claire yanked. The lever slammed down with a violent thunk. The hum of the basement died instantly. The lights went out. For a fraction of a second, the world was pure black. Then emergency lights flickered dim and delayed, casting the room in sickly half-light. In that half-light, Claire saw Harlan move. He grabbed a metal pry bar from the floor near a tool rack, lifted it with both hands, and swung it into the open junction box on the wall. Where thick cables met exposed copper, metal struck live current. A crack like lightning filled the room. A burst of blue-white arc flashed, searing violent a miniature storm inside the basement. The oxygen-rich air took it like fuel. Flame raced along the ceiling in a rolling sheet. Not a clean explosion, but a sudden roaring bloom that sucked breath and shoved heat outward. Cross's men screamed. One dropped his rifle and clawed at his face as the flash overloaded his vision. Another stumbled back, colliding with a pipe. The third fired blindly, rounds cracking into concrete, sparks flying. Sprinklers burst overhead, hammering the room with water. Halon hissed from ruptured lines in a choking cloud. Steam rose from hot metal and drenched concrete, turning beams of light into ghostly shafts. Claire coughed, throat searing. She stumbled back toward Harlan. Move, Harlan roared. He grabbed her arm and shoved her toward the back of the basement, where a small hatch sat in the floor, behind the boilers, half hidden by pipes and shadow. The hatch, he shouted. Maintenance crawl. Claire's eyes watered. She could barely see. The floor was slick now, water and condensation making every step a risk. Claire grabbed Harlan's wrist. Come. Harlan shook his head once hard. His face was lit by the pulsing emergency light and the remaining sparks, and Claire saw something in his eyes she had not seen before. Peace. He pressed the Zippo into her palm, fingers closing around hers. You take it. Claire's throat tightened. No. Harlan's mouth trembled. Claire. Boots thudded through the steam. Cross's men were regrouping, lights cutting through the haze, sweeping. Cross's voice rose, not panicked but sharp. Thermal. Find them. Harlan's good eye flicked toward the steam cloud. Thermal will see you like a lantern. He looked back at Claire. His voice dropped suddenly, quiet, in her ear, intimate. I cannot crawl. I will block it. Then you die with me. And the ledger dies too. Claire's chest convulsed. She shook her head, tears mixing with sweat. You are still alive! Harlan's lips curved into a faint smile, blood at the corner of his mouth. I have been alive on borrowed time. Claire clutched his hand. I can drag you. Harlan squeezed once firm. A soldier's squeeze. A father's squeeze. A goodbye without ceremony. Go, he said, voice turning into an order. That is a direct order, Nurse Maddox. Claire's whole body shook. She wanted to fight him. She wanted to refuse. But the sweeping beams were closer now, cutting through steam in brutal white slices. Harlan pushed her toward the hatch again, harder. Now, Claire dropped to her knees at the hatch. The iron ring was slick rusted. She grabbed it with both hands and pulled. It did not move. Claire's breath hitched. She pulled again, muscles straining. The metal screamed, faintly refusing. Rust held it like a fist. Behind her, a flashlight beam swung nearer. It hit the boiler casing, bright and blinding. Claire dug her fingers under the ring and pulled with everything she had left. Her shoulders screamed. Her arms trembled. Her palms burned. The hatch shifted a fraction. Claire pulled again, teeth clenched. With a groan of metal on metal, the hatch popped free. A wave of stench rose from below sewage and rot and cold water. It hit Claire's face like a slap. Freedom smelled terrible. Claire looked back. Harlan had stepped away from her, moving into the open, into the beams, drawing attention like bait. He stood in the center of 3 sweeping flashlights, pale and shaking gown, soaked blood spreading down his abdomen. He held the pry bar in his hands like it belonged there. One of Cross's men shouted. There. Cross's voice cut through the noise. Drop it. Harlan smiled. It was not kind. It was not warm. It was a wolf smile, blood-stained and defiant. Claire's throat tightened so hard she could barely breathe. Harlan's lips moved a whisper. She felt more than heard. Broken arrow. Then he raised the pry bar and swung it toward the junction box again. Cross's voice snapped sharp with something new. Fear. No. Metal struck copper. Light erupted. Claire slammed the hatch shut with both hands and shoved the wheel lock into place. The iron spun, locking with a hard clank. A concussive force hit from above, traveling through concrete and metal like a giant fist. The tunnel shook. Dust rained down. The sound was a muffled roar that swallowed her hearing for a moment, leaving only a high ringing. Claire pressed her forehead against the cold iron and sobbed once silent, the sound trapped in her chest. Then she forced herself to move. She switched on the tiny flashlight on her keychain. A thin beam cut into the darkness, pathetic against the tunnel's weight. The space was barely wide enough to crawl. Water pooled along the bottom, icy against her knees as she lowered herself into it. She tucked the Zippo deep into her pocket palm over it and began to crawl. The tunnel was slick with slime. The walls were rough concrete that scraped her shoulders. The water soaked her scrubs immediately cold, biting up her thighs. Rats skittered away from the light eyes, flashing red for a heartbeat before vanishing. Claire's knees scraped raw. Her hands sank into grit and grime. Her breath came in harsh bursts. Behind her above the hatch, there was no sound now. No alarm. No shouting. Only the distant damp echo of water dripping somewhere deeper in the system. Claire crawled anyway, inch by inch, breath by breath. The beam of her flashlight bounced against the walls, catching glints of rust and wet stone. Her mind tried to replay Harlan's face in the moment he stepped into the light. The calm in his eyes. The weight of his hand on hers. She swallowed hard and kept moving, jaw clenched until it ached. After what felt like too long, the tunnel angled slightly upward. The water thinned. The air shifted. The stink changed from rot to rain. Claire saw a faint seam above her, a grated opening where a sliver of outside light leaked through thin and gray. She crawled toward it, shoulders burning, and pressed her palm against the grate. It did not move. Panic surged in her chest, hot and sharp. She shoved again. Nothing. Claire sucked in a breath and pushed her shoulder into it. Once. Twice. The third time, rust gave way with a screech and the grate swung outward. Rain spilled in. Claire crawled up and out, collapsing onto wet asphalt behind a row of dumpsters. The storm air hit her face like a shock, cool and alive. Sirens sounded somewhere far off, muffled by rain. Traffic hissed on distant streets. Claire rolled onto her back, gasping, chest heaving. She shoved a shaking hand into her pocket and touched the Zippo. Still there? Claire lay in the rain for a moment with her eyes closed, letting water wash sewage and blood and grief from her face. Then she pushed herself up, trembling, and disappeared into the darkness of the alley. Rain blurred the alley into a smear of light and shadow. Claire Maddox stayed tight to the brick wall behind the dumpster's chest, heaving, listening for footsteps that never came. Her scrubs clung to her skin, soaked with tunnel water, and storm water gritty with whatever had lived beneath the hospital for decades. The air tasted cleaner up here, even with exhaust and rotting trash in it. She reached into her pocket again and felt the Zippo. Cold metal. Sharp edges. Proof. A siren wailed somewhere toward the peninsula, and then faded, swallowed by the storm. Another answered farther out. The city was awake now, but it was waking to the wrong version of the story. A fire alarm, a basement incident, an ICU disturbance, people in uniforms moving with purpose because that was what they were paid to do. Claire pulled her hood up even though she did not have a hood. She used her wet hair instead, tugging it forward to shadow her face. She moved out of the alley and into the street, keeping to the edge of light, walking fast, but not running. Running drew eyes. Running invited questions. She passed a closed coffee shop with chairs stacked inside like bones. She passed a bus stop shelter, slick with rain. Her shoes made a soft, wet slap with each step. Every time headlights swept across her, her shoulders tensed, ready to bolt, but the cars kept going. At the next corner, she stopped under the weak glow of a street lamp and forced herself to breathe like she had taught Harlan. 4 in. Hold. 6 out. It did not calm her heart. It made her steady enough to think. She needed a computer. She needed a connection that was not tied to the hospital. She needed time measured in minutes, not hours. She also needed to disappear. Claire's phone sat in her pocket like a live wire. She had turned it off in the tunnel. She did not want its glow. She did not want its pings. She did not want its map of her life. But she needed it for one thing, a single call that could not be made from a hospital line. She kept walking. An all-night internet cafe sat 3 blocks inland, wedged between a discount liquor store and a payday loan office. It was the kind of place college kids used when their printer died, and their deadline did not care. Its neon sign buzzed weakly in the rain, open, with one letter flickering like it might give up. Claire pushed through the door. Warm air hit her face, the smell of instant noodles and cheap carpet cleaner. A small bell chimed above her head. The fluorescent lights inside were too bright. They made her feel exposed, like she had walked onto a stage. Behind the counter sat a teenager in a hoodie, earbuds in, scrolling on his phone. He looked up and his eyes widened at the sight of her. Her scrubs. The grime. The blood at the cuff of her sleeve where the glove had torn. Her shoes dripping onto the floor. "You okay?" he asked, half rising. Claire did not answer right away. She walked to the counter and placed a wet $100 bill on the laminate, flattening it with her palm. "I need a booth," she said. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. No questions. The kid's gaze flicked from her face to the cash. He swallowed. "Ma'am, Claire leaned in slightly. Not threatening. Certain. Private booth. And if anyone asks, you did not see me." The kid's throat bobbed. He slid the bill under the counter like it was contraband. "Back corner," he said, pointing. "Booth 7. Curtains busted, but it closes." Claire nodded once and moved past him. Her wet shoes squeaked on the cheap tile. She kept her head down, aware of the other customers. 2 men hunched over screens with headphones on. A woman with tired eyes filling out something that looked like a job application. Nobody looked up for long. Nobody wanted trouble. Booth 7 was a narrow cubicle with a plastic chair and a desktop computer bolted to the desk. The curtain was thin and stained, but it slid closed enough to make the space feel smaller. Claire sat and let the curtain fall behind her. For a moment, she did nothing. She listened to the hum of the computer fan. She listened to the rain on the windows. She listened to her own breathing still too fast. Then she pulled the Zippo from her pocket. Her hands were shaking now, not from cold, from the aftershock of adrenaline with nowhere to go. She pried open the bottom plate and slid the micro SD card free. It looked ridiculous in her fingers. A sliver of plastic no heavier than a fingernail clipping. It could fit under a tongue. It could be lost in a crack in the floor. It could also destroy a man who had built his entire life on erased records. The computer had a card reader. Claire stared at it like it might bite. She inserted the card. The screen flickered. A folder opened automatically. A list of files appeared, names plain and clinical, like they belonged to a bureaucracy. Claire's mouth went dry. She clicked the first. A scanned memo filled the screen, letterhead blurred but unmistakably official signatures at the bottom. She did not need to read every line to see what mattered. Names, dates, authorizations, terms like expendable assets and non-attributable transport. She saw numbers that were not patient numbers. Coordinates, transfer amounts, the kind of language that kept hands clean while bodies piled up. Her vision blurred for a second. She blinked hard and focused. She clicked the second file, a table of coordinates, columns of latitude and longitude paired with notes. Short phrases: riverbank, mangrove edge, cut line, 3 remains, 9 remains, burn pit. Claire felt nausea rise and she swallowed it down. Her throat burned. She clicked the third file, bank ledgers. Transfers that looked like rivers flowing through shell companies and consulting firms and foundations with patriotic names. A trail that ended in amounts too large to feel real. Numbers that turned death into clean power. Claire sat back in the chair, the cheap plastic creaking. The rain outside sounded louder suddenly, as if the city was trying to drown the screen. Harlan had said the truth would die with him if she stayed. The truth was sitting on this monitor now, glowing in a booth that smelled like ramen and wet clothes. Claire moved her hands to the keyboard. Her fingers hovered. She did not trust local police. Not tonight. Not in a city where Adrian Cross could walk into a hospital with a smile and a badge and drop a doctor to the floor. She needed an audience Cross could not silence in a hallway. Claire opened a browser. The connection was slow. Ads loaded first bright and cheerful, as if the world had not changed. She searched for secure drop portals, the kind used for confidential tips. Major newspapers. Major broadcasters. Outlets with lawyers and reputations and a hunger for proof. She did not choose one. She chose several. Her mouse clicked. Upload button. A window opened asking her to drag and drop. Claire selected the folder. The progress bar appeared. 2%. 5. 10. The bar crawled as if it had to drag the entire weight of the past through a narrow pipe. Claire stared at it like it was a heart monitor. She looked at the door of the booth through the thin curtain. She listened for footsteps. She listened for the bell at the front desk. The cafe was quiet. The teenager behind the counter laughed softly at something in his earbuds. Claire's phone sat on the desk beside the keyboard, powered off, dark and harmless looking. She stared at it. She knew she should break it, toss it in a toilet, smash it under her heel. But she needed one call. The upload bar hit 23%. Claire forced herself to breathe again. 4 in, hold, 6 out. The bar hit 30, 40. A police cruiser passed outside, headlights sweeping across the wet street. Claire ducked instinctively. Heart jumping, then forced herself to sit back up. It was just a car. Just a city doing what cities did. She watched the progress climb, 51%. Her hands shook so hard she had to grip the edge of the desk to steady them. She thought of Harlan's face in the light, the way he smiled, like a man choosing the only thing he could control. She thought of her father's basement, the darkness, the silence, the sound of fireworks above, and his breathing below. She swallowed again, throat tight. 70%. Claire reached for her phone and pressed the power button. The screen lit. Notifications flooded in like a storm surge. Missed calls, text messages, voicemails. The first few were from the hospital. Claire, where are you? Security is asking. Police are here. Then numbers she did not recognize. Out-of-state area codes. Unknown callers. Voicemail icons stacked like bodies. Claire's stomach turned over. She turned the volume down to 0. The upload bar hit 84%. She opened the dial pad and typed a number from memory. Not the hospital, not the local precinct. She called the federal field office line she had once used for a training seminar about disaster response. It rang twice. A calm voice answered. Federal Bureau of Investigation, how may I direct your call? Claire kept her voice low. My name is Claire Maddox. There was a pause, the kind that meant the operator was typing. Ma'am, what is the nature of your emergency? Claire looked at the upload bar. 92%. I have evidence of federal crimes, Claire said. Arms trafficking, narcotics transport, unlawful killings, and the use of a covert unit that was erased from records. The operator's tone shifted, sharpened. Ma'am, can you tell me where you are calling from? No, Claire said. Ma'am, the operator pressed. Claire's fingers tightened on the phone. The name Adrian Cross. Another pause, longer. She heard a chair move on the other end, the faint rustle of paper. Ma'am, stay on the line, the operator said, voice controlled but urgent now. I am connecting you to an agent. Claire watched the bar reach 98%. She could not stay on the line. Staying meant being found. Being found meant the files could be interrupted. It meant someone could walk into this cafe and put a hand on her shoulder and end it quietly. The bar hit 100. The website confirmed receipt. Claire exhaled like she had been holding her breath for years. I am done, Claire said into the phone. Ma'am, do not hang up, the operator said. Claire's eyes closed for a heartbeat. She pictured Harlan again, pressing the Zippo into her palm. You take it. Not me. Claire opened her eyes. I am not asking permission, she said, and ended the call. Her hands moved quickly now. She ejected the micro SD card. She held it between two fingers, stared at it, then snapped it in half. The plastic cracked cleanly. The tiny chip inside shattered. She snapped it again. Then again. She did not stop until it was pieces in her palm like black sand. Claire walked to the trash can beside the booth and dropped the pieces into a wad of used napkins and coffee stirrers, burying them. She returned to the computer and cleared the recent files. She did not trust it. She did it anyway. A gesture, a habit. A nurse cleaning a wound even when the patient was already bleeding out. She slid the Zippo back into her pocket, empty now, and stood. Her legs felt weak. Her body wanted to sit down and cry until morning. She did not let it. Claire pushed the curtain aside and walked to the counter. The teenager looked up again, eyes wide. You need me to call someone? Claire shook her head. She slid another bill onto the counter, this one dry. Forget my face. The kid's throat bobbed. Yes, ma'am. Claire left the cafe. The rain hit her immediately, colder now, as if the storm had moved closer to the ground. She pulled her scrub top tighter around her and walked into the night without looking back. She did not go home. Home was a pin on a map. Home had a mailbox, a neighbor, a predictable route from the hospital. She moved through side streets and parking lots, staying away from main roads, letting the city's noise cover her. Near dawn, she found a cheap motel on the edge of town, the kind with doors that opened to the outside and a lobby that smelled like bleach. She paid cash. She used a fake name without thinking. She slept for 2 hours on top of the blanket with her shoes on, waking every time a car door slammed in the lot. When her phone buzzed again later, she did not answer. She did not read the messages. She turned it off and removed the battery if it had one. It did not. She wrapped it in a towel and dropped it in the motel trash under coffee grounds and half-eaten food. She left without checking out. By noon, the storm had blown itself north. The sky over Charleston turned a washed-out gray, the kind that made the city look tired. Claire walked into a drugstore and bought scissors, hair dye, and a cheap hoodie. In the bathroom of a gas station, she cut her hair short enough that it no longer clung to her face. She dyed it darker with hands that still shook. She scrubbed her skin until it burned. She looked at herself in the mirror afterward and barely recognized the woman staring back. The bone structure was the same. The eyes were different. Too awake, too old. At the airport, she kept her head down and her mouth shut. She wore oversized sunglasses and the hoodie pulled up. She paid cash for a ticket at a kiosk that did not ask too many questions. She did not check a bag. She carried a small backpack with a change of clothes, a bottle of water, and the Zippo tucked deep inside. The departure lounge was filled with the quiet tension of travelers pretending they were calm. Coffee cups, laptop screens, children whining, a man in a business suit asleep with his mouth open. Television screens hung from the ceiling, all tuned to the same news channel. The volume was low, but the captions crawled bright at the bottom. Breaking news. A photo appeared of a man being led out of a gated property in handcuffs. Silver hair disheveled, glasses crooked, his face contorted in anger that looked almost childish without his suit's control. Adrian Cross. Claire stopped walking. Her body froze as if someone had called her name. She stared at the screen, breath shallow, heart loud in her ears. The anchor's mouth moved. The captions rolled. Defense contractor arrested. Federal investigation. Massive corruption scandal. Classified documents leaked by an anonymous source. Allegations of illegal arms shipments and narcotics routes. Allegations of extrajudicial killings connected to a covert program. The anchor's expression was practiced serious, the face of someone who had read tragedies on camera for years. Footage shifted to the exterior of St. Bridget's Medical Center. Fire trucks, lights, people in scrubs standing in the rain, a stretcher rolling into an ambulance. The camera panned to the basement access door and the scorch marks around it. Caption: Hospital fire under investigation. Claire's stomach tightened. The anchor's voice continued the captions summarizing. No fatalities reported. Minor injuries treated. Smoke inhalation. Evacuation protocols executed. The hospital's backup systems activated. Authorities praised staff response. Then another line of captions. An unidentified male body recovered from the basement. Claire's throat closed. She pressed her fingers to her mouth under the hoodie eyes, burning behind the sunglasses. The screen showed a still image from a hospital security camera. Grainy, black and white. A thin man in a gown standing under harsh light shoulders squared despite everything. His face was turned slightly, and even in the blur, Claire recognized the set of his jaw. Harlan Tate. The captions did not use his name. They called him unidentified, a patient, a heroic victim. Claire's chest tightened until she could barely breathe. She stood there in the airport with people flowing around her, and for a second, she felt like she was back in the tunnel, pressing her forehead against iron, hearing the world go white above her. The anchor continued, words moving across the screen about inquiries. Committees, federal agents, a spokesperson from the Department of Defense, refusing comment. The story was becoming what it needed to become. Public. Loud. Too big for one man in a suit to erase with a quiet syringe. Claire turned away from the screens and walked to a seat near a window. She sat with her back to the wall and her eyes on the room. Habit. Training. Survival. Outside, the glass planes moved slowly through the wet, light white bodies and blinking lights. The runway glistened. Claire reached into her backpack and pulled out the Zippo. It felt different now, lighter, empty of the card, still heavy with meaning. She had bought flint and lighter fluid at a gas station on the way to the airport. She had done it without thinking at first, then realized why she had done it and kept going anyway. She flipped the lid open. The metal click sounded loud in the quiet pocket of her seat. She spun the wheel. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a flame blossomed, steady and orange, small but stubborn, dancing in the reflection of the window glass. Claire stared at it as if it could speak. She lowered her voice until it was only for her, only for the memory of a man who had forced himself into the light so she could crawl away. Perimeter clear, she whispered. She let the flame burn for a moment longer, watching it hold its shape against the hum of the airport and the movement of strangers. Then she snapped the lid shut. The click sounded final. Claire sat still, hands folded around the Zippo in her lap, and let the noise of the terminal wash over her. Her phone was gone. Her name was not on any visible paperwork. Her hair was different. Her clothes were different. But she was still Claire Maddox, Stonewall's daughter. In her mind, names rose like ghosts, not as captions on a screen, but as people. Men who had vanished. Families who had been given silence instead of answers. A unit that had been treated like a clerical mistake. Claire opened her backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper she had written in the motel room. Names she had found in the files. Names paired with addresses, phone numbers, old contacts. Some of it was incomplete. Some of it was enough. She did not smile. She did not relax. She held the paper like it could cut her. A boarding announcement crackled overhead. Claire stood when her group was called. She moved with the flow of passengers toward the gate, head down, shoulders steady. At the threshold, she paused and looked back once toward the row of televisions. Cross's face was still there, still twisting with anger as agents guided him into a vehicle. The captions kept rolling relentless. Claire turned away and stepped onto the jet bridge. The air smelled of recycled ventilation and faint jet fuel. Her shoes scuffed the carpet. The line of passengers moved forward in patient increments. A flight attendant smiled and greeted her. Claire nodded without meeting the woman's eyes, then found her seat and sat by the window. She placed her backpack under the seat in front of her and kept the Zippo in her pocket. As the plane pushed back from the gate, the city beyond the glass blurred again, wet and gray and distant. Charleston receded into a skyline of low buildings and marshland and water, a place where a hospital had held a battle. It was never built to fight. Claire watched the runway lights slide past. Her hands were finally still. When the plane lifted, the ground fell away and the clouds swallowed the city. For the first time since the ICU, Claire allowed her shoulders to drop a fraction. She did not close her eyes. She held the folded paper in her palm, feeling the ink impressions through it, the shape of names that deserved to be spoken out loud. The plane leveled. The cabin noise settled into a steady roar. Claire stared out the window at the bright white cloud tops and kept breathing 4 in hold 6 out, letting the rhythm carry her forward.